Welcome back to another My Hero Academia anime vs manga video breaking down season 7 episode 18 titled It's a Small World, sharing the same title as chapter 384. The episode begins with Toga not being able to use Toya and Shigaraki's quirks, and the anime here adds in a bunch of new scenes when Toga is panicking over not being able to become twice Toya and Shigaraki, such as Toga in an Ochako and Twice form, using Ochako's quirk, Shigaraki and Dabi panicking, and Shigaraki and Dabi using their quirks when Toga states that Twice could become them. Continuing on, Ochako is able to locate the real Toga out of the infinite amount of Twice doubles by zeroing in on Toga's tears, calling back to how Ochako loved seeing people happy, making it easy for her to spot Toga crying in her Twice form. Switching back over to Tokoyami, hitting All For One with Light of Balder, Hawks tells Tokoyami to keep All For One pinned down to run out his rewind. Jiro yells out to the others to block the light in order to fuel Dark Shadow's darkness. Kami begins to create a Aurora night sky. Then suddenly, All For One creates a huge explosion, releasing him from Dark Shadow. It's then revealed that All For One is now even younger than before, looking almost like a teenager. He then flies off to Shigaraki with the heroes following after him. All For One and Hawks had came to the realization that the situation was actually perfectly optimal for the both of them. Giganto Makia is then seen running straight at them. All For One tells Makia to flatten the heroes, but Makia throws a chunk of earth at All For One, shocking the villain. We then see a beat up Kirishima and a concerned Shinso riding on top of the giant, heading back in time once again to the Jakku Hospital ruins after word spread about Shoto defeating Dabi. Here, the anime doesn't adapt the first page of chapter 383, showing Mina as the ultra high frequency emitter is going off. In the sky, avoiding Mudman's quirk, the villain who ended the life of Midnight tells the heroes that their high frequency sound waves mimic All For One's voice. So no matter how solid Makia's restraints are, the voice will pierce every wall and be picked up by Makia's superior hearing thanks to his dog quirk. Mount Lady tries to attack the villains to prevent them from waking up Makia, as she knows that from the perspective of ordinary people, Makia embodies pure psychological scarring. Suddenly, the reinforced hangar containing Makia is completely destroyed as Makia bursts out trying to escape his restraints. Kirishima running reveals that the escort mission he had completed earlier entailed warping Shinso to Jakku and keeping him hidden away from the battlefield without having the villains catch on, which the anime does actually show Shinso and Kirishima going into the portal together and warping to Shinso's hiding spot. Shinso and his quirk was a backup plan for the heroes in case Makia was to escape. Kirishima calls out to Shinso, but the sludge villain happened to be in the middle of taking over Shinso's body. He tells Kirishima that being inside of Shinso made for a better hiding spot than that plucky middle school kid. The sludge villain here referencing the time he tried to take over Bakugo's body. This also means that he isn't aware of Bakugo actually being a hero taking part of this war. The villain who finished off Midnight claims that the weak are meant to suffer and submit. Makia, searching for All For One, takes down Mount Lady and tries to deliver a blow that would kill the hero. But that's when Mina maxes out her acid and uses Acid Man Alma to melt Makia's fingers. Mina says to herself that she couldn't pull this move off during the last war, and she had Bakugo and Shoto fill her in on their special training method in order for her to master her quirk, with the anime adding in Mina talking to Shoto and in a live Bakugo. She states that she won't allow herself to fail to protect what she cares about, as we see an added shot of Midnight. She once again uses her acid to attack the sludge villain, and her using so much of her acid as such strength and volume is causing her pink skin to gradually go away and the whites of her eyes beginning to show, as the acid in her body is what caused her body to have pink skin and blacked out eyes to begin with. The sludge villain tries to escape, but Shinso brainwashes the villain, freezing him in place. Kirishima calls out to Mina as her acid is burning her skin. She states that Shoji never wanted revenge and she loved Midnight's classes. She knows everything about fear because she is weak. That weakness made her form packs and get close with people, but the same goes for the villains, as that's what defines them all. Since heroes and villains are one in the same, the villain thinks of Redestro. Makia once again goes in for another finisher on Mount Lady, but Shinso mimics All For One's voice with his persona chords, basing All For One's voice on recordings from Tartarus. He brainwashes the giant and commands Makia to attack the villains in the air. air. With Makia now under Shinso's control, the emitter device from the villains can no longer compete with him. The anime here adding 2 shots of Makia smacking villains out of the sky and roaring. Mina falls over exhausted from the overuse of her quirk, and Kirishima catches her and apologizes for being a letdown. Mina tells him that she repaid him for saving her in the last war, and Kirishima responds saying she never owed him anything and that she has always been his hero. It's then announced that the heroes have stopped the villains from reclaiming Makia. Mount Lady then gets word for reinforcements on All for One. Back to the present, Tsukauchi prays that their hopes aren't in vain as they send everything at All for One, including Makia, as we see Makia, Mount Lady, Tokoyami, and the heroes all working together in bringing down All for One. The anime here doesn't adapt the panel of the news helicopters flying in. Tokoyami and Hawk, seeing Makia join the fight, came to the conclusion that Shinso is in control of Makia. Hawk states that this is why Tsukauchi called this a gamble, as Shinso's brainwashing can be undone by a mild impact. All for One, bombarded by several incoming attacks, realizes that Makia being with the heroes explains how the Aoyama family was able to deceive him, as this was being done by a manipulation type quirk. All for One fuses his quirks together and claims that manipulation is his modus operandi, referencing how manipulation has been his way of operating for his entire life and what he is known for. He then hits Makia with a blast, as once Shinso's brainwashing is undone, All for One will take back control over Makia. Makia tells All for One that despite his form being changed, he knows All for One by scent. He has searched for his master for a long time, confronting All for One on why he left Makia behind during the PLF war. This confusing Hawks, as brainwash wasn't reapplied after Makia was hit. We then flash back to the day All for One had left Makia in the mountains, telling Makia that he would be in hiding soon, but his successor will seek him out in the future, and that his greatest regret in leaving Makia behind is that he won't get to pamper and spoil him anymore. Remembering all of this makes Makia cry as he recalls during the last war, after having faith and waiting for All for One for so long, he had abandoned him and ran. Shinso, having been protected by Kirishima from All for One's attack, states that Deku and Makia are the only two to have ever put up a fight against his brainwashing, as Makia, when brainwashed, muttered to himself, expressing his deep-seated anger over being betrayed by All for One, which is why Shinso isn't brainwashing him and is just tagging along for the ride as a backup in case Makia attacks the heroes. Even though Shinso has been told his quirk seems villainous, his quirk can't control a person's heart, so he is letting Makia rage at All for One over betraying him. Hawks tells all of the heroes and Makia to keep All for One pinned down until he vanishes, as we see everyone bombarding All for One with more attacks. Switching over to the news helicopters and reporters, the MHA camera woman, prior to being in the helicopter, had shown the news reporter the live stream of the war. The reporter begins tearing up, as after seeing the live stream she remembered Deku being the same kid who a year ago was shaking in his boots before the sports festival, and now being the one to fight the world's most dangerous villain. We then see Deku grabbing hold of both Shigaraki's wrists as Shigaraki laughs, trying to kill the hero. They notice the second news helicopter, where we see the news reporter who came at Endeavor during the news conference after the PLF war. She tells the cameraman that her being there is personal and that this war is personal for the heroes as well. Deku and the heroes had to watch their colleagues step away from the war, so those who remained on the battlefield chose to do so. She states that the news outlets all over the world are reporting the fall of Japan, but she is there to get word out that they still have people fighting for them. This story will be told whether the heroes claim victory or taste defeat. The anime here doesn't adapt the 2 panels showing UA still being held by Gentle in another location in the war. She continues stating by showing their story, and however it may end, they will unify everyone and make the world that much smaller, letting the world know that their story isn't over yet. Here we see a bunch of cameos as people from all over the world are seeing the heroes of Japan fight this war, such as the President of the United States and Agpar, and characters who have only appeared in the movies, such as Melissa Shield from 2 Heroes, Mahiro and Katsuma from Heroes Rising, Roro and Lala Soul from World Heroes Mission, and Anna Servino and Giulio Giulio Gondini from You're Next, all hearing and watching the war in Japan. This marking all of their first appearances in the anime. Well, technically this does exclude Melissa, as she did appear in the season 3 filler episode Save the World with Love. But not only does this canonize all of the My Hero Academia movies, the anime added in the You're Next characters, showing that Anna and Giulio stayed at one of the UA shelters after the events of the My Hero Academia You're Next movie. Unfortunately, the anime doesn't adapt the panels showing Salam in Egypt and Elect Plant in London, as well as the panels showing the map of everyone trying to stop All For One. Switching back to the heroes, as they all bombard All For One with attacks, All For One sends out a tendril quirk monster, biting Mount Lady and knocking her down. Makia also gets hit by a powerful beam, and it's then shown that All For One's flesh and bones had been completely torn off of his body due to the hero's attacks. He rises in the air, charging up a powerful quirk-fused beam aimed at Tokoyami and Hawks, stating that the darkness within him is getting harder to control the younger he gets, and fires the beam at the two heroes. Hawks tries to protect Tokoyami, but the two are hit. The more All For One gives into his darkness, the more he can draw on his quirk's latent potential, thus creating the cataclysmic blast of light used to attack Tokoyami and Hawks. All For One states that it's great being young, creating a blinding light. It's then revealed that All For One had defeated every single hero. All For One states that Tokoyami had pushed him into a corner, so now he will take his quirk. He tells Hawks to get out of his way, as All For One holds Hawks by his neck, and Hawks, having impaled his sword through All For One's shoulder, trying to protect Tokoyami from him. All For One then steals Hawks' quirk, calling Fierce Wings a garbage quirk. Hawks then realizes that the quirks All For One steals and has stocked up are treated as external factors that aren't affected by rewind. All For One also takes note that all of the damage he takes speeds up the rewind on his body. Mineta tells All For One to take his quirk instead of taking Dark Shadow from Tokoyami. All For One thinks of Jiro and calls them all weak. He then drops Hawks and notices the helicopters and states that the people will see this carnage and lose faith in heroes all over again, and how the heroes couldn't protect a single thing, and blasts off towards Shigaraki. The episode then ends with Hawks remembering Seiji's words, and Hawks stating that there is still a glimmer of hope. Now, this episode covered about 4 chapters, then being the rest of 382, 383, 384, and half of 385. This episode was amazing, all from the animation, direction, and voice acting, and I know I say this every week, but I'm super excited for the next episode. Let me know your thoughts on the episode. Did they cook with the changes? Let me know everything in the comment section below. With that said, if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to Detroit smash that like button, and if you are new to the Kiroki channel, then be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so that you don't miss any My Hero Academia Season 7 breakdowns. With that said, I'll see you all in the next one.